Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherilyn, and I am so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for joining me every single upload. You know I love and I appreciate you so much. All right, I got caught in another wormhole this weekend. I came across like a blog post all about celebrities who have killed. I don't know if I've been living under a rock or what, but there were so many that I didn't know about. So I wanted to chat about a few that I came across. I mean, there's lots, so who knows? I probably will want to talk about more in the future, but these are some of the ones that I want to talk to you about today. All right, let's get started. The first one I had no idea about, and that is Dog the Bounty Hunter. Listen, I wasn't a religious dog watcher. I saw the, very early episodes, but I don't recall ever watching an episode or several episodes where he really got into it. I didn't religiously watch like interviews where he would have talked about this. So it just wasn't on my radar. Now the story is quite interesting because although Dog didn't actually shoot the shot that killed the man, he was convicted of first-degree murder. This happened in 1976 in Pampa, Texas. At the time, Dog was a younger biker, and he was waiting in the car while a friend of his allegedly accidentally shot a 69-year-old man named Jerry Oliver. Allegedly, Jerry was a pimp and a dealer. So this fight where he was accidentally shot and killed was over a cannabis deal gone wrong. It sounds like there was several hours and moments that passed that led up to this event. The shooter and friend of Dog's was a man named Donald Kuykendall. And earlier on in the evening, Don had been drinking quite heavily with a couple other friends and his girlfriend. They decided they wanted to pick up some Mary Jane. And Jerry was known to carry hefty amounts of marijuana and other substances. So they headed just straight over to Jerry's house. When Don arrives, he knocks on the door, but a woman answers and she just simply says, Jerry's not home. Fair enough. They leave. They stop by this lounge called the Peppermint Lounge. And there they run into a guy named Fuzzy. I mean, who doesn't? It comes out in conversation that Don had just been to Jerry's and that he wasn't home. And Fuzzy tells him that's bullshit. He knows that Jerry's there and he knows he's got a lot of pot. So this got Don quite agitated. He was lied to. So he and his friends go back in the car, and now it's decided that they're going to go back to Jerry's, but now they're going to rip him off and steal the pot, as one does. They left the lounge and went to one of their friends' houses who had a shotgun. The intention was to just use this as a scare tactic, I guess. After they went and picked up the shotgun, this is when they went over to Dwayne Chapman, aka Dog the Bounty Hunter's house, and he joined in on the ride. He had a weapon of his own, and then he gave Don shells for the shotgun because he didn't have any. Dog says that it was when he arrived in the car that he was actually filled in on what the actual plan was. And he testified he didn't think it was a good idea for Don to have a shotgun to go up to the door if he wanted it for protection or something and feel better in the car. That was one thing, but he didn't think it was a good idea to go just have this conversation or try to rip him off. And he's packing. Dog was then told by Don, I know what I'm doing, and actually come to think of it, he owes me $40, so I'm going to get it. I'm going to bring him outside. I just want to talk about it. All I need is for you guys to be here to make sure that nothing happens to me. Don's own words, he said he walked up to Jerry's house. There was this screen door that was open, so he was able to just slip on in. He said he opened the door and he had the shotgun at his right side. He said as he was stepping in, Jerry sees him. And before he can say anything to him, Jerry lunges at him. He said everything happened so fast. There was this tussle between them. Next thing he knows, his arm is being pulled out and he hears Jerry say, "Oh Lord," and he falls down. And when Don gets up and goes over and looks at him, he sees he's struck him in the armpit. He also noticed that he had also injured himself with this gun on his thumb. And the friend who owned this gun said that this gun was in rough shape. He said the gun was defective and it wouldn't snap back into the barrel as it was supposed to. So you had to hold it a certain way to keep everything kept together, I guess. And even Don said that as everything was processing, he was looking and seeing pieces of the gun that were just like all over the floor. So he's trying to gather those and run out of the house. When police arrived on scene, Jerry was still clinging to life, so he was able to just give them names. Unfortunately, he died in the hospital the next day. But having those names, the same day he died, the detective was able to start making arrests. And the first person arrested was Dog. It sounds almost like a classic Dog takedown when he was arrested. The police had gone to his house and they waited outside and they were all like staked out, making sure that they had the front and backs covered in case he tried to run. And he did. And then the officers were right there, dog style, ready to tackle him. Later on in the day, Don and his girlfriend Cheryl and their other friend Ruben, who was also in the car, were also arrested. And like I said, although Dog didn't make the shot or take the shot that killed Jerry, under Texas law, anybody who was involved indirectly in a killing could be held responsible. And so he was. He was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years behind bars at Texas State Penitentiary. However, he was released after only a year and a half of serving his sentence. It was pretty much right then that he decided he wanted to be somebody who was on the other side of the law, not the one getting in trouble. However, being involved in this event had its repercussions that still to this day affect him. For instance, he is not able to carry a weapon or a gun. And this is why when he goes out and takes people down, he's using a taser. I'm not going to lie, I had no idea that bounty hunters were able to even, carry regardless. I thought they, just weren't allowed, and that's why he was just like tasing people. Dog accounts his desire to get into law enforcement, be a bounty hunter, from an event that actually happened while he was behind bars. Allegedly, there was this plan for this prison breakout, and while it was just about to get started, getting really out of hand in the jail, Dog tackles this prisoner. He didn't tackle him necessarily to do harm. This guy was actually about to be shot by the guards, and Dog was like, hey, you get down, calm down. This is not a good idea. And if you get up and try to push this, you're gonna get killed. He says that during this event, as the guard was coming over to take over this situation, he said, hook him up, bounty hunter. And from there, it stuck. Who knows if that's actually true or just kind of like a spin that he wants to put on the career that he now has. But there are a lot of workers from the prison that were there during that time that did say they saw something else in Dwayne and believed that he would be able to turn this around and make something of his life. I read that he was even the warden's barber. So it's like they trusted him enough to get them all spiffy. And that respect in him, I think, was able to give him the confidence to go out and turn the situation into something positive. Oh, Dog. I mean, it's hard because, of course, you just don't want to encourage any type of behavior being associated to like murders and stuff in prison while they take place. But I will say it's a good example of seeing somebody own up to their mistakes. It's not something that he's ever tried to shy away from or not talk about. He's very aware that this decision that he made has impacted his entire life. I believe he has made several appeals to try to have the charges expunged from his record so that he is able to carry a little bit more force with, on him for his job. And I don't believe that he's able to be in the UK, which he has expressed some interest in doing because of these charges. So that's also something that he's wanting to revisit and have it reversed. I truly do think people can change. There's also the added fact that he was not the shooter, and multiple witnesses who were in the vehicle that night said that he was trying to strongly reason with Don and encourage him not to go up with a weapon. I don't think that he ever wanted somebody to lose their life. And it's hopeful to see somebody come out of a situation like that after being institutionalized. Obviously, it wasn't for a very long time, but still, I mean, a lot of people who have been in similar situations have just gone back out and repeated the same behavior. And say what you will about Dog, I do think that he comes from a genuine place to try to be a better man. The next guy we're going to talk about, I don't feel the same about. Now, I knew he had a past, not a stellar reputation. If you have a hardcore boxing house like ours, I'm sure you've heard this name, and it's Don King. Don has promoted some of the biggest fights of all time. He's worked with Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson. The list is huge. Very accomplished fighters. However, before Don promoted any boxing fights, he was convicted of not only killing one person, but two in separate instances. So convicted of murder 2 different times. And despite those killings, he spent less than 4 years in jail. Don was born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1931. In high school, he dabbled himself in amateur boxing. I guess the career wasn't very promising and didn't last very long, though. After high school, his goals were to become a lawyer. And to pay for his college education, he became a numbers runner. I guess this is a courier of illegal betting slips. From this, he built quite the name of himself, and he became known as one of the leading racketeers in Cleveland at the time. He started to focus on this career more than putting himself through school and built some gambling houses. And it was in 1954 that he shot a man named Hillary Brown, who was allegedly trying to rob one of these gambling sites. He was charged and the case went to trial. And then in court, Don said, yes, I did kill him, but I did so in self-defense. His argument was that a fight ensued. He was just trying to protect himself and his business. And the court agreed that it was justifiable homicide, so he was released. 12 years later, on April 20th, 1966, still in the numbers game, he gets into an altercation with one of his employees, who was a 34-year-old man named Sam Garrett. This altercation happened outside, though, so there were witnesses. Don said this fight started because Sam had owed him $900. Garrett's argument was that he only owed him $600. And this back and forth between the two started this altercation on the streets. Depending on where you read or whose account of the events you listen to, they vary a little bit, but they're pretty consistent in the fact that witnesses saw Don kicking Sam in the head. He made contact at least 3 times, and he also hit him repeatedly with a .38 caliber revolver that he had on him. Don was 100 pounds heavier than Sam, and it took detectives who were on the streets witnessing this to come over and pull him off of him. From there, Sam was immediately rushed to hospital, but he died 5 days later. Another thing that witnesses have said that they heard during this fight was Sam pleading with Don, saying, I will pay you your money. His trial took way in 1967, and again during the trial, Don claimed he killed him in self-defense. Don denied ever stomping on Sam, which was another thing that witnesses said that they saw, including the detectives who were there to pull him off of him. He also denied ever hitting him with a revolver, which again was something that multiple people testified to. And he really tried to play off his attack on Sam as being minimal, like doing the least amount of damage. He was like, well, when I punched him, it was only with my left hand. And if I kicked him, it was because I was returning kicks that he was, giving me. After closing arguments, the jury went and deliberated. They only deliberated for 4 hours, and they came back with a verdict of second-degree murder, which did hold the possibility for life in prison. However, the charge was later reduced to voluntary manslaughter, so Don only spent 3 years and 11 months in prison. It was pretty quickly after his release in the early 1970s that he just dove right into the boxing world. And I believe the event that really put him on the map was he organized this charity boxing event, and he got Muhammad Ali to agree to box on it. This was supposed to be an exhibition event, and it was to raise money for a hospital in Cleveland. Sounds honorable, except allegedly this event made $85,000 in ticket sales, which in the 70s is pretty good. And of that $85,000, apparently the hospital only received $1,500. Despite this, and having a huge name like Muhammad Ali, he went on to become one of the biggest boxing promoters in the world. To this day, he does find himself at the center of a lot of controversy, a lot of lawsuits. Multiple figures like Muhammad Ali, like Mike Tyson, have sued him and alleged that he has withheld millions of dollars from them. A lot of them were settled out of court. And what's really frustrating is so many of these settlements had this fine print clause in there that if the person who, was just about to sue them but settled ever fought again, he would make a certain percentage off of that fighter in said fight. He's also been charged with tax evasion on numerous occasions but has never been convicted. And now in his 90s, he is retired, but reportedly worth over $190 million. He also has a road named after himself in Cleveland. I guess this is on a road where he owned or still does own a newspaper, but it became a very scandalous event when in 2016, there were two politicians that were trying to have the Don King Road moved to another street. And when residents heard about this and they look at the street, they're horrified because it was the street that Sam was killed on. I guess it never went through, but I mean, just even the thought that is even came up as a possibility, I can't.
No. Only in America could a Don King happen.
All right, the last case that I want to talk about today is another one that I knew of just based on the headlines, but I hadn't really dug deep into it. And these past few nights, I've been really unsettled by it. I can't help but feel like it could have been avoided all around. It's just a huge loss for absolutely everybody. And it's the murder of Kathy Davis, who was murdered by an actor named Johnny Lewis. Johnny, I distinctly remember from Sons of Anarchy. In the early 2000s, though, he was also known as Katy Perry's boyfriend. And now he's known as this deranged, unhinged actor who committed a grisly murder and took his life. It's so hard to try to understand these cases, especially when on the outside looking in, you look at these people and you just think they have everything going for them. Like, why would they ever do something like this? And especially Johnny, he is somebody who is said to have been destined to have this successful career in the stardom. When he was only 6 years old, his mom was taking him to auditions, and the hard work paid off. If you watched a lot of TV in the late 90s, early 2000s, you probably saw him on some of your favorite shows like Malcolm in the Middle, Seventh Heaven, Drake and Josh, The OC. Spoiler alert, I'm just about to put out here if you haven't finished OC. Quickly fast forward here. I will never, ever get over Marissa's death. Anyways, this was around the time that he was actually dating Katy Perry. She was also an up-and-comer, and both of their names were becoming to be more recognized. Their relationship only lasted about a year, though. Allegedly, though, the one that got away and Circle Drain were written about him. So around this time, this was when he landed a recurring role on Sons of Anarchy. He played Half Sack, who was the prospect. He's trying to get patched into the club, doing all the work that the other guys don't want to do. And I guess his name came because his character had served in Iraq and had like a little bit of a mishap, thus losing half his sack. I mean, Jax really stole the show for me, so it's hard for me to really remember anybody else that was on there, but I definitely recognized him from there, and I knew instantly who he was when I saw his face in these headlines. After season 2, he expressed his desire to be written out of the show. He had told friends and family that he just didn't like where it was going, and it was becoming too violent and not aligning with his values. Something to know about him is that he was never somebody who wanted to be a part of the Hollywood scene and partying and drinking and doing drugs. He was somebody who would rather go to a friend's house and have a low-key night and play chess until 3 a.m. He also really liked writing, which was something that he wanted to focus on. And when he was leaving the show, he finds out that his girlfriend, not Katy Perry, a gal named Diane, was pregnant with his baby. So his plans were to just really pour himself into writing. He wanted to write a novel and make a name for himself that way. Things unfortunately didn't play out like that. After his daughter was born, the relationship between him and her mother, his girlfriend, Diane, fell apart, and it led them into this really nasty custody battle. It was a battle that ultimately Johnny lost. From there, things just kind of started to spiral. The following year, he was involved in a motorcycle accident. After the accident, he was seen at the hospital by a doctor. They looked for signs of concussion, but apparently the call was made that they didn't see any signs. Now, I am not a doctor. I am not a professional. I'm not judging, but I'm just going to put this out there. If you were in a damn motorcycle accident, I think it should just be like precautionary to treat the patient as having a brain injury or concussion. I don't know. And I guess Johnny's family felt the same way. After this accident, they saw a huge change in him. For the first time in his life, he became violent, which was not the Johnny that they knew. And he also sometimes would speak with this odd attempted British accent. Johnny would just kind of try to lightly explain these things away, but it concerned his family enough, especially his dad, to try to encourage him to go and at least get an MRI to see if there was something that was missed after this accident. Johnny didn't want to. Even his dad made 2 separate appointments for him to go and get a scan, and he never showed up to any of them. So in 2012, he's staying with his parents at their condo, and he says that he hears this commotion going on at the neighbor's house. So he goes over to the neighbor's house and breaks in. He's looking around. As he's looking around, the neighbors who live there walk in. They see him, they're unsettled, they're asking him to leave, and from this point, he just becomes erratic. Supposedly, there was this empty glass Perrier bottle nearby, and he grabs it and just starts swinging at them. He struck one of them a couple times. So he's arrested, charged with assault with a deadly weapon. Note to self, if you are caught with a Perrier bottle as a weapon, it is a deadly weapon, and also charged with trespassing and burglary. He's sent to a jail called Twin Towers, and after being put in jail, his behavior became even more aggressive. While he's in custody, the guards see him just bashing his head into this concrete wall, and he even tried to jump off this platform that was 2 stories high down below. This incident led him to needing to be placed in a psychiatric ward for 72 hours. But then he was released, and not long after that, he was released from jail. He'd only spent 8 days in jail. This release was also highly unsupported by his probation officer as well as his family. They all said that they didn't think that it was in the best interest of the public for Johnny to be released at this time. It fell on deaf ears. He was released, and again, this Johnny that came home to them was somebody that they didn't recognize. He looked sickly. He was gaunt. He was often incoherent and almost like in this dreamlike state. He again made attempts to take his life. He was also very hypersensitive to light, not just outside light, even inside the house, where it got to the point where he was ripping out the fuse boxes to make sure that there was no light in the house. He also attempted to break into a woman's apartment. There was also an occasion where he walked just aimlessly in this lucid state into the ocean, fully clothed, and assaulted another man, this innocent bystander outside of a yogurt shop. It was decided then that Johnny was going to go and try treatment. It was at this ranch. It's called Ridgeview Ranch, and it's known for treating conditions like psychosis as well as drug abuse. To everybody's excitement, Johnny actually seemed to be responding pretty well here. He was placed on medication. He started feeling like himself, and he got to the point where he was able to articulate what he was going through in those earlier weeks and months, and he said that everything felt very scrambled to him. He'd have all of these thoughts and know that they didn't quite fit together, but didn't know how to grab them and piece them into a puzzle, and he was finally being able to do that. Because of this attempted break-in at that woman's apartment after his other release from prison, he was sentenced again. This time he was sentenced to a year in prison, but he only actually ended up serving 6 weeks due to overcrowding. His family was trying to think of ways to bring the Johnny they knew fully back. So his dad arranged for him to go to LA and stay with a well-known woman in the community named Kathy Davis. Kathy's home is known as the Writer's Villa. Its purpose was to house up-and-coming writers, actors, playwrights, and be inspired in this space and allow them to focus on their craft. She was 81 years old, and this had been something she had been doing since the 80s. Professionally, she had been a real estate broker, but she always was involved in supporting local art and artists. She sounds very giving, very encouraging. And this was a place that Johnny actually was already familiar with because in 2009, he had stayed with Kathy for 2 months. This was a memorable time for him. Even his friends said they remembered how fondly he spoke of Miss Kathy, as her tenants referred to her as. She sounded like somebody who was very maternal and very nurturing. Kathy was originally from Texas, but she moved to California in the 50s, married her husband, had a daughter. Her daughter is also a writer. And then in the later part of her life, when her daughter was grown and moved out, she found herself divorced and she was just soloing it in the house. She became a realtor. She was very successful at it. And initially the idea was to open up her home to buyers that were coming from out of state or out of the country and just have that be one last piece of stress on their shoulders while they were trying to find their forever home, so they didn't have to go there and just quickly rush to move into something that they didn't really want simply because they didn't have a roof over their head. From there, it eventually evolved into this bed and breakfast and then this homestead for up-and-coming talent. Some people who have stayed there were Chris Cornell, Val Kilmer, Parker Posey. And I guess the house arrangement wasn't necessarily the appeal. It sounded like a large part of it was also Kathy. She was known and relied on, if an audition didn't go well, just to be that comfort. I guess she would reassure you were going to be okay and then just like whip up her hot tamales. So Johnny and his family were really hopeful that this was just going to help bring him back into an era that was familiar to him. Obviously, we know that's not what happened. On September 26, 2012, Johnny had only been out of jail for 5 days. The only thing we really know is something set him into a rage. Neighbors initially saw him outside pacing, wearing nothing but jeans and these red shoes. Just based on his body language and demeanor, he looked just erratic just by looking at him from your window. And his next door neighbor was keeping an eye on him. And the next thing he knows, there's this knock on his door and he goes to it and he opens it up and Johnny's like, "Oh, hey, I'm John. I'm your new neighbor." And he's like, "Oh, hi, John. Nice to meet you." He said they both just kind of awkwardly stood there and then he just walked away. So he goes about carrying on with his day, and he said half an hour later, he hears this scream from his wife. He rushes out to her, and Johnny, is beating the crap out of a contractor that they had hired on their property, painting their porch. He says he sees Johnny just covered in blood. The worker's a mess. He runs over, tries to get him off of this painter. Johnny turns around, punches the neighbor in the face, who is a 70-year-old man. So he falls, gets up. By this point, Johnny's just kind of standing there, like huffing and puffing. And so the neighbor takes his shot and socks him back. But he said like nothing happened. So he gets this chair that's nearby, bashes him with this. And then he said at this point, it combobulates him enough that the three of them, the neighbor, the wife, and the contractor, can run into the house. The way it's described is actually like a horror movie scene. As they're running in, there's like the Michael Myers hand through the door trying to still attack them. They're trying to close themselves in, but it takes like a lot of force and they have to keep slamming the door to get Johnny's hand out, which is really unsettling when you remind yourself that this actually isn't a horror movie. And what had taken place before this was a real life tragedy. After they're able to lock themselves in the house, the neighbor calls 911. Police arrive within minutes and they're coming on the assault call, but as they are pulling up to the neighborhood, they see in Kathy's driveway a body. They get closer and it's Johnny. He's dead and it looks like it was either a fall or intended jump from the roof or top balcony of the house. And when they enter the house, the scene is much worse. Inside, they find Kathy beaten to death in her bedroom. I'm not going to go into graphic detail. It's believed that several items were used in this attack. In the house, there was a hammer, a pencil, covered in blood. And then there was also a trail of blood that led to the bathroom. And inside the bathroom, her beloved cat was also deceased in the shower. What's even more unsettling when you think about it is it's described that Johnny was covered in blood while he was attacking this contractor. And I'm sure initially the neighbors thought that it was probably the contractor's blood on him. But investigators believed that Kathy and her cat had already been killed prior to Johnny coming back that second time, and it was most likely their blood. The whole situation is just a tragedy all around. I truly believe that Johnny was suffering from a traumatic brain injury, not only from the motorcycle incident, but then you have to remember all of the following trauma that happened to it when he was in jail, bashing his head into this concrete wall, jumping off of this platform. Also, the attack on the neighbors that initially landed him there, they were exchanging blows as well. Like, so he was also getting hit in the head during that fight too. And brain injuries can be so dangerous, not just for the person who is experiencing it, but those around them. The effects on the psyche are devastating. You are left with irritability, extreme irritability, not just like I'm having a day, I'm in a mood, but uncontrollable irritability. You're not able to control your impulses. Extreme violence is also a very common side effect with frontal lobe injuries. And I don't know how the situation could have been avoided or what needs to be put into place for something like this to not happen again. I think that is one of the main reasons people who are interested in watching true crime, I'll speak for myself, that is one of the main things that I'm always thinking about. I think that is my main takeaway from every single case that either I talk about or I see on like Dateline or something like that. It's something I carry with me to try and avoid happening again. Why else? Why else? We need to learn from these situations. And so I don't know what that could look like in a situation that would happen like this again, because everybody was trying to do what was best for Johnny and really help him. I don't know if there's some law or clause out there where in a situation like this, when somebody has changed that drastically in such a short amount of time, and it seems to be pretty obvious that it is because of a injury, caused by an accident or something like this. I don't know where, a power of attorney, somebody who's trusted is able to take over and make these decisions for them. Because I do think that if Johnny would have gone to one of these MRI appointments that his dad had made for him, I think they would have had clearer answers and a better treatment plan for him. And even maybe himself hearing and knowing like this, okay, this is the cause, also can alleviate some of that frustration about not knowing what's going on with you. There's a reason, there's a treatment plan, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't think that he saw a light at the end of the tunnel. And that just sucks. I believe that Kathy, her cat, and even Johnny, I do even believe that he should be here. She sounded like just such a cool gal, and I just keep going back to her. I've heard of how toxic and dangerous Hollywood can be, especially for up-and-comers. So to have this, home base and this maternal figure, someone who's supportive and encouraging, and somebody who you could go to, it's really a loss. Cases like this, they're tough for me. All right, that is it for me today. This is where I will leave you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please do not forget to like this video or subscribe to this video. It helps me immensely and I appreciate it so much. I'll see you in my next video. I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.